Hello and welcome to the Cohasset Political Society. I'm your host, Andy Tierney. Today, we'll be taking a special look at the recent UK elections where we had a surprise. The Conservative Party, the reigning party in Britain, lost seats, resulting in a hung parliament. Now, for those of you at home, a hung parliament is when one party does not get a majority of seats, which means they'll have to form a coalition, or worse, there will be no prime minister. So to take a look at that, we'll go over to a panel of political society members headed by Jack Fector. Jack, to you.
Thank you, Amby. This is the panel on the UK election. I'm Jack Fector. These are the boys. These are the cold ones. Let's crack them open.
So in the UK yesterday, there was a surprise election.
All right, Patrick, so how about we pull up the map right here, and how about you break it down for us?
Okay, so the Conservative Party is the one that called the surprise election. Theresa May believed that they would be gaining seats, but in fact, they actually lost seats.
And can we clarify, it looked like they were going to win seats until the terrorist attacks ended up happening.
So the Conservatives ended up losing 13 seats. The Labour Party ended up gaining 29 seats. The Liberal Democrats gained 5 seats. And the Scottish National Party lost 21 seats.
Give them back, Patrick!
The Labour Party actually won London, but all around London, mainly Conservative. But terrorist attacks had a very big effect on this election.
But can we go back a few months and just remember the fact that people were talking about England being a one-party state because Labour was going to be so wiped out?
They're coming back now.
So you guys have brought up the fact that the terrorist attacks have really had a massive influence on this election. And I think historically, in different parts of the world, we've seen conservative parties do better in the wake of terrorist attacks, and that doesn't seem to be the case here. What do you think has caused that shift?
I think GPA Boy has a point when he says that, and it's mainly due to Theresa May's record as Home Secretary, I believe, and being accused of being soft on terror and being part of the establishment that's done nothing to deal with terror.
I think people are wanting change.
So Theresa May, in her career, she has not typically been very strong in terrorism. She's known for cutting down the police force or lessening anti-terror agencies, and so people are kind of mad about that. If there were a conservative party that was like the Conservative Party in the U.S. that was all very anti-terror, very anti-immigration, all that. If their leader was more like Trump rather than Theresa May, I think they would have gained significantly from the terrorist attacks. It would have helped them because they're saying immigrants are bad, and then they have proof. So I think it's just Theresa May's record. I agree with what you guys are saying that led to the decline.
I think similarly, Jeremy Corbyn's record against terrorism, I think people believe that he will be much stronger against it. Therefore, the Labour Party is becoming more relevant.
And now that's interesting. I just want to add to that. All over the world, the past few years, we've been looking at two parties that are loosely defined in their normal modern construct. Do you think we're looking at a party shift right now? Do you think the Republicans or the conservatives here are going more left on trade and the left might be going harder on terrorism?
I think that is a possibility. John, what do you think?
So I think if we look at around the globe, I think that there is starting to shift ideological lines within each party. I think as the world becomes more politicized and different parties are working to try and figure out, create a better base to ensure election wins, which have been very inconsistent the past few elections around the globe. There's definitely a shifting ideology. I think it might be too early to sort of define what those shifting ideologies are, but it'll definitely be something to look at in the future.
And AP Bio Boy has a point. I think that it's rare that we see one party tougher on immigration, but not tougher on terrorism.
That's a very
There
good
are
point.
usually
That is
two
a
sides.
very
They're
good
kinda
point.
Let's look at the National Front in Spain or France. And Marie Le Pen was tougher on immigration, tougher on terrorism because she saw those two as connected. Are they no longer connected in England?
Well, I think in England, I'm not sure. I don't have the statistics off the top of my head, and I could be wrong. But from what I have read previously, a lot of the terrorist incidents in England are not necessarily not more often immigrants, but are usually have a lot to do with Muslims born or raised within England itself. and not-
Homegrown.
Homegrown. Yeah.
In America, we have the similar thing, and yet still the conservative party is tied to immigration and terrorism. They see them as the same. Even though, I mean, look at America. Most of our terrorists are from here.
True. Yeah, but I mean, in America, we like to demonize like
The other.
the other. Yeah, we like to say, oh, can't let any foreign people in because they're all like the terrorists and it's all going to be terrible. And I think that's what London was like. I like Brexit. That's
Well,
one of the-
that's
I think that is part of rhetoric being used to gain political favor for the Republicans.
Yeah.
I think that they use that to gain favor. They put it off against other people. Then people can relate to that. I
Yeah.
think that's what's happening, and I think that's kind of what was trying to happen in the UK,
Yeah,
but
it didn't work.
Didn't work out.
It's too easy to simplify it though, as saying like, oh, the racist people are gonna vote for the strong on immigration party because London went Labour, right?
London did go Labour, yes, but
And they
Yeah,
have
but
a
larger urban areas tend to be less
Yeah,
conservative.
but,
that
though.
seems
but
to
you
be the
also
case
you have to talk
everywhere.
about Theresa May versus Peter Corbyn to be able to like
Jeremy
make
Corbyn.
Jeremy
Jeremy.
God,
no.
that was bad. Jeremy Corbyn to
I
be
guess
able to
I'll
make
keep
that.
these.
Theresa May has not shown to be as tough on terrorism as she needs to be.
I agree.
I think
I think
that's
if she was tougher on terrorism,
Yeah.
the Conservative Party would have been a massive majority, and they would have had a lot of Brexit like momentum.
I think that's why.
Do you
London.
think Theresa May's attack on net neutrality and the fact that there was a large youth vote turning out in this election had anything to do with the way that the results ended up turning out? I know Theresa May has been advocating for more government surveillance on the internet, and I know there was a large youth vote, especially for the Labour Party in this election. Do you think that may have been more influential than terrorism in the nation?
I'm actually not familiar with enough English politics to say, but certainly in America, it sounds like that plays a role the millennial vote in electing Obama and trying to elect Hillary.
I think overall the youth vote isn't as conservative as older
Agreed,
people are.
yeah.
So
Yeah.
usually when the youth vote comes out, the Conservative Party would suffer. I don't know if it necessarily has to do with net neutrality, or if it's just the youth vote in general.
Well, the youths in England, just like in America, they love Corbyn because
Yep.
he's far left, just like youths in America love Bernie Sanders.
Or Justin Trudeau? in
I love
Canada?
Justin Trudeau.
Yeah,
Justin
true.
Trudeau.
He's a,
True.
he's a
Great
good
guy.
guy. Just
Great
a good
guy.
He's a
guy.
great guy. He's a great guy.
Great hair.
Great guy.
Fantastic.
I know. I would love to
hair.
have dinner with that man.
Yeah, great guy.
Anyone,
be my president.
You guys want to compliment him more? Let's talk
Yeah,
about
let's
it?
do a little more.
Okay,
I'm
yeah.
down.
Can we pull?
Can we just go through a run through? Can we go through a run through?
Can we pull up a picture of
Yeah.
Justin Trudeau?
Justin Trudeau,
As you can probably see, great hair,
chiseled jawline,
chiseled
chiseled.
jawline,
chiseled.
Beautiful man.
and it's him and Macron are developing such a new
Yeah.
relationship
Yeah.
after.
Macron's cool too.
I see it. You see Obama and Macron have lunch. Do you see that?
I did not see that.
They
I
had
know
lunch.
he's buds with Merkel.
I
though.
see a bromance. There's a
Oh.
bromance going there.
That's what we like to see.
Yeah, we turned into the View real quick, real quick.
What's wrong with the view?
So,
What
but
is wrong with The
so
View?
as
Say it
Jackson,
to my face.
so as Jackson was saying earlier, though, I really think that the conservative vote was impacted not only by Theresa May's stance on terrorism, the youth vote like coming out. I think it was also, but although after the first terrorist attack, the one in Manchester, Theresa May actually got like a fairly large bump in the polls, which was quickly like erased, and then she got like a deficit. But there was like an initial reaction that was like, oh, we need to go conservative, we need to like do tougher
Yeah.
borders, and then people were like started to calm down, and then she ended up like losing.
I think that's usually seen in history is that usually right after a terrorist attack, there is a big uproar
For the party in charge.
in the party
Yeah.
in charge.
I was-
But I think after the most recent terrorist attack, they're seeing she's not being tough enough on it. It's not helping enough.
It
They
might have
need
been the
change.
fact that there was 2 or 3 terrorist attacks
Yeah.
within the span of 2 weeks.
Now,
that didn't help too
I
well.
was
Yeah.
so after Manchester was the first one. I was like shocked. Theresa May calls off the election or postpones it, and I was like, "Why would you do that? You're gonna win. Everyone likes conservatives right now." I didn't understand the issue then, and it's clear that people relate her with a weak stance on terror.
All right, these
Okay.
cold ones have been cracked open. They're getting warm. They're getting lukewarm. So I think we're gonna end things here.
I almost just choked on it. I saw my life pass before my eyes.
Thank you, Jack. Very insightful. Now, to take a more inside look, we're going to go over to Matthew Dickey, who's going to be interviewing a guest from the school. Matthew, take it away.
All right, thank you very much, Amby. Today we're going to be interviewing a teacher here at Cohasset High School, Dr. Tomei, or Doc T as we call her. Doc T is our expert on all things Scotland. Doc T, why don't you come on in?
Matthew, it's wonderful to see you.
Thank you very much for doing this interview.
Oh, I am honored to be doing this interview today.
All right, so just for the viewers at home, could you
Yeah.
maybe explain a little bit about your Scottish heritage?
Sure, I can put on the accent, nae bother at all if you like. I've been going to Scotland since I was about 7 months old. My father dropped me on the runway, and that's why I am the way I am today. But I'll put on my American accent for you all, but I'm 100% Scots, and I'm 100% American, and Scotland is my tribe and one of my true loves.
That's great. So today we're going to be talking about the recent UK election. And so as you know, Theresa May's Conservative Party called the snap election, and it looked like they were going to win, and they actually lost their majority, and now there's a hung parliament. What is your take on that?
Well, that's a very, very complicated question,
Yes.
Matthew. There's a lot of things that happened. Theresa May was not elected. She was just the leader of the Conservatives when the previous leader stepped aside. And in the interim, the terrorist attacks in Manchester, I think really had a huge impact. Because Theresa May, being a conservative, was always interested in saving money. And so she had made different policy changes prior to this in her long-time career as a politician to cut back on funding for police. And so the Brits have a wonderful police and security system. They've been dealing with terrorist bombs since the IRA back in the 70s and 80s. And London has been used to bombing. If you think about World War II, it was bombed. So I think that people were surprised at the impact of the current homegrown terrorism in Britain, and Theresa May paid the price for that.
Yeah, we discussed that in an earlier segment, how much the recent terrorist attacks definitely had an impact on that election.
That's part of it.
So moving on more to your area of expertise with Scotland. So as we talked about a little bit, the Scottish Nationalist Party the Scottish Nationalist Party won in Scotland, although they've lost 21 seats since 2015. What is the direction that party is going in right now?
That party is kind of stabilizing where it needs to be. It's very unusual to talk about what had happened prior to 2015 because there are 59 districts in Scotland, and the Scottish Nationalist Party, or as I affectionately call it, the SNP, the SNP had won 56 out of 59 at the previous election. It had been a landslide. And so now you say, well, they've lost 21, so it sounds so dramatic. But what had happened before was even more dramatic than that, so it's just stabilizing. But there's so many things that play a role. What happens with populations is it's like a pendulum. A certain person gets in power and everyone feels like that's wrong, so they vote the other way. Possible shout out to what could happen in the future in US politics. But what happened in Scotland, for Theresa May, was the Brexit. The Brexit vote caused her to deal with a situation that was untenable. And basically what's happened in Scotland was the Scots have been fighting for their independence for millennia from England. They have been downtrodden people who have been imposed of English rule and English law in some ways. And back in 2001, the Scots got devolved parliament, which meant that a parliamentary building in Edinburgh that had been empty for 300 years at 1707 when the Union of the Crowns occurred became active again. So Scotland has gone through this incredible renaissance of political activity with a new Scottish parliament. Scotland, one of the pushes of the SNP is for independence. The SNP is not solely for independence. They're for a lot of other progressive policy feelings. But they had a referendum and they lost. And that is why the next election went 56 seats to the SNP. So now that's just stabilizing. What had happened prior to this had been so dramatic. They wanted their independence. It was a 55% vote. They lost hand down. And then the English politicians reneged on their promises, and so the next election went 56 out of 59 for the SNP. So it's really just time. I think eventually the way things have gone with the current parliamentary house in Edinburgh, that is doing, basically that has all the power that it needs except the power of setting the currency value and the military. So I think eventually that Scotland will go back to being an independent nation. In many ways it is. It's never lost its value structure as being an independent nation. But the SNP is only one of many, many parties in Scotland. Scotland has Tories, which are conservative. It has Labour, which we might think of more democratic. They've got the Scottish Nationalist Party, who consider themselves democratic socialists. They're supportive of social systems. They have the Green Party, they have the Liberal Democrats. So they have 5 or 6 really active parties in Scotland, and that's partly another reason why 21 seats, because they went in different directions.
Yeah.
Sorry, that's a really long-winded
No,
answer.
that was a good answer, though. I guess in continuation with that thought, who, in your opinion, are the major leaders in this SNP? Obviously, we have Theresa May and Jeremy Corbyn are sort of the big names in in the Labour Party and the Conservative Party.
Correct.
But in the SNP, who do you see as some of the larger names?
Oh, well, that's a great question. I'm sure there's a lot of young ones coming up. But the primary person in Scottish politics right now is the First Minister of Scotland, and her name is Nicola Sturgeon. And Nicola is... she was the deputy First Minister to Alex Salmond. So Alex Salmond has been the primary mover and shaker over the last 15 years in Scotland, who brought the SNP out of their 50-year existence into the public eye more. And he was just one of these, as often happens, charismatic leaders who people could just listen. He was a great orator, and he had this lovely woman by his side, Nicola Sturgeon. And Alex Salmond brought the vote. When the vote for independence went down 45 to 55, he stepped aside and Nicola took the reins. So for the last 5 or 6 years, Nicola's been the First Minister of Scotland. She is an amazing woman. Do you know, one of the things that bothers me about American politics is the fact that our Senate has only roughly 20 women to 80 men. The Scottish Parliament has 50-50, 50 women to 50 men. Very impressive, very diverse, up there with women's rights. And Nicola is the role model for any woman. She supported Hillary in our last election, and she's already been visiting Governor Jerry Brown in California to sign treaties with him since Trump was elected, because she's not getting anywhere with Trump. So Governor Brown has already signed climate change and energy treaties with Nicola Sturgeon of Scotland to set up a California-Scotland link. Her husband, Peter Murrell, is actually a good friend of mine. And, and right now they're talking about making him resign to take the fall for this 21 seats. Which absolutely should not happen, because he runs the finance side of the SNP.
Right, that's a great answer. Thank you. So more transitioning back into the overall UK election. So since there's a hung parliament, for Theresa May to retain her power, the Conservative Party is attempting to build a coalition, and they're doing so with the Democratic Unionist Party. What is the outlook on this, in your opinion?
Oh my gosh. This is going to be so exciting. I mean, people who aren't emotionally attached to this are primarily just curious about how this is going to work out. Wow. This party that you're referring to, the Democrat Socialist?
The Democratic Unionist Party.
Unionist Party, right. So who they are, that's Northern Ireland.
Yeah.
Boy, this brings in a new whole kettle of fish.
Yeah.
I mean, as you probably know, the United Kingdom is made up of 4 nations, England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland. As the land mass lies, Northern Ireland should be part of regular Southern Ireland. But it's a complicated history that I'm not an expert on. I'm sure you know a lot more about it, Matthew, from your studies in history class. But William of Orange, there were battles in Ireland. Ireland got their independence from England. But a part of solving that problem, they gave them the North. The North was signed over to England and to Britain at the time that Ireland got their independence. So the Northern Irish question has been a big question. It's been called the Troubles over the years, because it's not settled there. No. And if you've noticed, it's been nice and quiet there for many years. Shout out to Bill Clinton, who did a lot to help America's role in the world, to kind of temper that problem in Northern Ireland. Sometimes the Northern Ireland crisis is thought of similarly to the Mideast crisis between Israel and Palestine, the North and the South. There are some similarities because it's religious.
Yeah, the Protestants versus the Catholics.
Exactly.
Major conflict.
So the Protestants historically were people from Scotland and England who could handle the climate. And they are what we call unionists. They are still unified to the crown. They still want to be connected to Great Britain and to London and to a monarchy. Whereas the Catholics are more connected to Ireland, the nation of Ireland, which is part of the EU and doesn't want anything to do with getting out of the EU. So the North has been very quiet for many years, primarily because they were waiting to see what Scotland would do, to see what would happen with the Scottish question. Once the Scottish question had got answered, then the North was going to get out. But the Scottish question wasn't answered.
No.
And so now, Theresa May and all the British prime ministers have been very good at not aligning themselves with either the Unionists or the Irish in Northern Ireland. Now they're going to be forced to take a side. And that's going to probably push the Catholics in Ireland in the wrong direction.
Yeah, that'll be very interesting to watch.
And you know, that's what the IRA was. The bombings had to do with the IRA fighting for that. So it's going to be very, very, very interesting moving forward. You know, the Irish got their independence from Great Britain, from England, I would say, by shedding a lot of blood.
Yes.
And the Scots have been trying to do it through referendum, through diplomacy. And the Irish were hoping that that's what would happen with Scotland so that they could quietly follow suit.
So now speaking again on the referendum, I think in the original referendum, or the most recent referendum, was before the Brexit vote.
Right.
And then after the Brexit vote, a majority of Scotland voted to remain in the EU. Is that correct?
The Brexit is even more interesting, Matthew, because if you think about it, London has 20 million, Greater London has 20 million inhabitants. It's like a small country.
Yes.
And London voted 70-30 to stay in the Union. The rest of England voted to stay out, and that outweighed London. In the meantime, in Scotland, it was the same thing. 70%, that's a huge number, think of it.
Huge margin.
Of the Scots wanted to stay in Brussels, wanted to stay in the EU, and 30% were happy to go out. So the minute that Brexit vote happened, Nicola Sturgeon contacted Brussels and said, if we get our independence, we want in, and he said, no problem. So
that leads into my next point. Beginning in late March, there have been sort of beginning calls for a second referendum in Scotland. And with this hung parliament and no really major authority figure right now in parliament, do you think that will speed up the process towards Scottish independence? Or?
Actually not. I thought that the SNP, the Scottish Nationalist Party, they were saying they had after the other one went down, they said, yep, we're going to take a step back, run our country, offer the social values, the social safety nets that we're so great on. Scotland's great on education and welfare and taking care of the most in need in the culture and in the society. I think Scotland, they said they'd take a step back, maybe have a 5-year window to that. Things were going relatively well prior to Brexit, and I think they had pushed that up, and that maybe they were looking more at a 2 to 3 year window for the second referendum. Clearly, at that point, it was looking like they would get it because of that 59 margin that I told you about earlier. And with Brexit, with Theresa May, with the terrorist things, with this now connecting with the Unionists in Northern Ireland, I think it's totally up in the air.
Really?
I don't know that this is going to push it forward.
All right.
I think most Scots nationalists are pretty downtrodden right now.
All right. So I guess any last thoughts that you want to bring up that I didn't get to ask you about?
No, I just want to say that, first of all, everything that you've asked me, all of my responses have been my own opinion. I'm very passionate about these things.
They've been great responses. Thank you very much.
Thanks. And I just love the passion that you and your peers here at Quasit High School show towards history. And you guys always get me in the loop when it comes to anything to do with Scotland, and I really appreciate that, Matthew.
Well, thank you very much.
Thanks a lot.
It's been good. All right. Thank you, Ambi. Back to you.
Thank you, Matthew, and thank you, Doc T. And thank you all at home for tuning in. This has been an episode of Cohasset Political Society. We've hoped you've learned a lot about the United Kingdom's recent election, and we'll see you soon.
I think it's.
Any more good-looking world leaders we want to talk about?
Ooh.
Who's the former prime minister of Italy? That guy's pretty good looking. I forget his name.
Can we pull up a
I
picture?
saw him on CNN.
Can we
Mussolini?
pull up a picture?